How are you guys doing? Today is Thursday, July 8th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and with this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Marlon Humphrey, the elite cornerback for the Baltimore Ravens, turns 25 today. And with this episode, I'm going to give a little bit of context and a little bit of understanding just to give a sense of his accomplishments and his feats and what he's been able to achieve from the moment that he stepped foot in the limelight at the University of Alabama to this moment right here, just to get a full picture of the type of player that he is growing to become and he is growing into. As of right now, he's 25. If you ever seen him, he's about 6 foot, 197, which is kind of light for an NFL player. But if you see how well he moves, he's incredibly light. He's incredibly nimble, very quick with his feet, very physical with his hands, which is of course why he makes up for what he makes up, which of course makes up for his size. Incredibly big hands, and at the same time, incredibly intelligent. A ball hawk player. You can tell that he's definitely a player that studies that puts a little bit more time in the film room than a lot of other DBs, and it most definitely shows on the field. That's why he's regarded by Nick Saban and John Harbaugh as one of the best, as one player that is turning into one of the best defensive players that the NFL has ever seen. So originally he came out of Hoover, Alabama, which of course makes sense as he would eventually go and play college football within the state for the University of Alabama with Nick Saban. He would go on to be he was actually a 5-star coming out of high school. He would eventually redshirt his very first season there, and he would officially take the field as a redshirt freshman in 2015. In 2015, in his very first season, he would play 15 games in a season where Alabama finished by beating Clemson in the national championship. This is the year that they beat Deshaun Watson, if I'm not mistaken. But they would, and this is the year before they lost to Clemson. So in this very first year, they finished as the number 1 team with a 14-1 record under Nick Saban. And of course, under Nick Saban, this was his 4th title with the team. In that very first season, Humphreys in those 15 games have finished with about 45 tackles on the season. 3.5 of them for loss. He had 8 passes defended, 3 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles on the year, just to show the kind of player that he was at Alabama. Of course, because it was Alabama, so he wasn't the only superstar player on that defense, but he was most definitely not a weak point on that defense. Following his redshirt freshman year where he won the championship with Alabama, he came back for his redshirt sophomore season. He would play 14 games in a season where Alabama would go on to finish with the same record, 14-1, as they lost to the Clemson Tigers in the national championship. They lost this one by a possession, and this is when Deshaun Watson established himself as a college football legend. But regardless, throughout the season, Marlon Humphrey would go on to finish with 36 tackles, less than the previous season. He had 3 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, a forced fumble, but he did have a pick 6 this year, which was different from the previous year. And after his 2 years at Alabama, he would, of course, be recognized as a first-team All-American in his second year. And in 2017, he was the 16th overall pick in the draft as he was taken by the Baltimore Ravens. He was actually the second cornerback taken in that draft, as Marshon Lattimore, was the corner for the New Orleans Saints, and another elite cornerback on my list was taken 5 picks ahead of him, just to give a sense of where he was. And then also ahead of him, Jamal Adams, the elite safety who now plays for the Seahawks, and Malik Hooker were the 2 safeties, the 2 other DBs that were taken ahead of Marlon Humphrey in the draft. So once he was taken with the 16th overall pick in the 2017 draft, he has played his entire career for the Baltimore Ravens. He would play his very first season in Baltimore in 2017 in his age 21 season. In that season, he would start 5 of the 16 games that he would play in a season where the Ravens finished with a 9-7 record. The only season since he's been on the team in which the Ravens did not make the playoffs, but they still finished with a winning record. He finished with 34 combined tackles on the season, not to mention he defended 11 passes and had 2 picks on the year. He would go on to establish himself as a good young player, but he would see his role his roles and his responsibilities increase as the years went on. His second season in Baltimore was 2018, his age 22 season. In that year, he would start 8 of the 14 games he would play in a season where the Ravens finished with a 10-6 record, and they would still make the playoffs. This would be the year where Lamar Jackson took over as the starting quarterback midway through the season for Joe Flacco, and they would eventually make the playoffs off of a result of making that decision. In his second season in the league, he would finish with 37 tackles, 3 more than the year before. He finished with 15 passes defended. The second year in a row, he had at least he had double-digit passes defended, and that's the most passes defended he's ever had in a season. He also forced a fumble and finished with 2 interceptions on the year. And even though he wouldn't really get accolades for that, he would establish himself as the full-time starter for the Baltimore Ravens by season's end. Once they made the playoffs after Lamar Jackson won the MVP, John Harbaugh won the Coach of the Year, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Following the 2018 season, the Baltimore Ravens would lose in the wild card round to the Los Angeles, then San Diego Chargers. And following that, Marlon Humphrey would come back to the Ravens in his third season in the league. In 2019, he would go on to start 15 of the 16 games he played in a season where the Ravens would finish with a 14-2 record, with the best record in the AFC North. This was the season where Lamar Jackson won the MVP, John Harbaugh won the Coach of the Year, and Greg Roman won the Assistant Coach of the Year. And in this season specifically, Marlon Humphrey would be named an all-star and a first-team all-NFL pro, as he would finish with 65 tackles on the year, which is almost double what he had on the year before. 4 of those tackles for loss. He had 14 passes defended, which is roughly what he had the year before. He had 3 interceptions on the year, which is the most he's ever had in a season. He was able to force 2 fumbles. He recovered 3 fumbles, and he finished with 2 fumble and 2 of his 3 fumble recoveries did result in touchdowns. And considering the fact that he was a Pro Bowler and a first-team All-Pro in his third season in the league, of course, would speak to his dominance and his ability to play. And this was his very first year as a full-time starter for the Ravens. Once they made the playoffs, they ended up losing in the first round to the Titans, and this is when Derrick Henry ended up virtually winning the game by himself, along with the offensive line as well. But following the 2019 season, Marlon Humphrey would come back to the Baltimore Ravens for his 4th season, which was his most recent season, the 2020 NFL season. He would go on to start all 15 of the games that he would play in a season where the Ravens would finish with an 11-5 record. The 3rd season in a row, they finished with a playoff seed. This was the first time that they made the playoffs without winning the AFC North as well since he'd been there. But in this season, after being established as a first-team All-Pro corner, which is either the best or the second-best corner in football, he would go on to be named a Pro Bowler as he finished with 85 combined tackles on the season, the most combined tackles he's registered in a season thus far. Finished with 4 tackles for loss as well. He finished with a safety. The only safety he's ever logged in his career was this year. He finished with 11 passes defended on the year, his 4th straight season of double-digit passes defended. He would go on to finish with an interception on the year, which of course was good. He forced 8 fumbles, which led the entire NFL in forced fumbles. And at the conclusion of the season, he was named an all-star for the 2nd year in a row. And once the Ravens made the playoffs this year, they would beat the Titans in the first round, the team that beat them the previous year. They won by a touchdown. And then they would end up losing in the divisional round to the Bills, as the Bills went on to the AFC Championship and ended up losing to the Chiefs. But that was the furthest that the Ravens have gotten to the playoffs since Marlon Humphrey's been there. And of course, that should paint a picture of the type of player that Marlon Humphrey is. He is, ever since he's been a full-time starter, he's been at least an all-star for the last 2 years. And it shows that, and it seems as though he has no signs of slowing down. The fact that he's a corner under 200 pounds and he finished with 8 forced fumbles in a season, that's the stat that jumps out to me. And of course, a bunch of other stats and statistics jump out. But of course, all of these numbers just paint a picture for the type of player that Marlon Humphrey is. So once again, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 9 minutes of this piece. I want to wish Marlon Humphrey a happy 25th birthday. If you ever get a chance to watch him, he's currently wearing number 44 with the Ravens, and they usually have him guarding the best wide receiver on the other team. Yes, this is definitely a player that is not overhyped, overblown. This dude, all the hype is most definitely deserved. And if you watch the Ravens, you'll see why. Thanks once again to, of course, Football Reference, College Football Reference, Wikipedia, ESPN, NFL, for, of course, giving me the facts and figures in order to do this. And once again, I want to thank everyone for once again listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and once all of today's matchups and exhibitions are done, I will come back tomorrow for another episode of The Elite. But until then, thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I will catch you with another episode of this with another episode of The Elite tomorrow.